Neighborhoods that look perfect on the surface often hide the darkest secrets. And my story begins in one of those communities. My name doesn't matter here. What matters is what I do. By day, I'm the chief of police in my city. By night, when I come home, I'm just another homeowner in a seemingly quiet neighborhood. A neighborhood controlled by a very strict homeowners association. At first, everything seemed fine. Clean streets, perfectly trimmed lawns, houses painted the same neutral colors. On the surface, it looked like the safest place you could live. But beneath it all, I started noticing things other people ignored. The HOA president, Mark, had his eyes on everyone. He fined people for the smallest things. Grass an inch too long, cars parked slightly over the line, even holiday decorations that didn't match the community's standards. And anyone who dared to question him became a target. I don't tolerate injustice. So in a few HOA meetings, I started asking questions. Where exactly is all the money going that the HOA collects every month? Why do fees keep increasing without any explanation? And who gave you the authority to dictate residents' personal lives? Every time I spoke, the room went silent. Neighbors avoided eye contact. And Mark, he just stared back at me with that cold, arrogant smile. That's when I knew I had crossed a line. Then the signs began. One evening, I sat on my porch and noticed a black SUV parked at the corner of my street. No lights, engine running. Someone was inside. At first I thought it was a visitor, but that SUV didn't move for over an hour. It was watching me. The next morning I checked my mailbox. Inside there was a folded slip of paper. No official letterhead, no signature. Just 5 words written in block letters. Stop questioning the HOA. Last warning. I slipped the paper into my pocket and went back inside. A normal resident might have called the police, but I am the police, and I knew if I reacted too soon, they'd cover their tracks. I needed to wait, watch, collect evidence. The harassment continued. Petty fines arrived every week. $50 for chipped paint on my mailbox, $100 for a single weed in the yard. It was obvious they were targeting me, but what disturbed me more was the silence of my neighbors. They knew something was wrong. I saw it in their eyes, but fear kept them quiet. The black SUV returned. This time I was ready. From my upstairs window, I grabbed my binoculars and read the license plate. The next day, I ran it through our system at the department. The plate didn't exist. Fake. Now my suspicions were confirmed. Someone was deliberately surveilling me, and I didn't need to guess who was behind it. After the next HOA meeting, Mark pulled me aside. His tone was calm, almost casual. You think your badge makes you untouchable? Here, you're just another resident. Play by our rules or you'll regret it. No anger in his voice, just confidence, as if everything was already planned. From that day forward, I changed my routine. I logged every suspicious car, every shadow near my house. I repositioned my security cameras. I was preparing for something big, and then it happened. One cold evening, I was reviewing some case files in my living room when I saw flashing red and blue lights outside my window. At first, I thought it was just a routine patrol, but when I opened the door, 2 officers stood on my porch. Dark uniforms, hats pulled low. One of them held a folded sheet of paper. Sir, we have a warrant for your arrest. Step outside immediately. Most people would panic, but I didn't. Instead, I studied their badges. It took me less than a second to know they were fake, wrong font, missing serial numbers, patches sewn incorrectly. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I'd comply. I looked them in the eye and asked calmly, "Which precinct are you from?" One of them stammered, Central Division. That's when I smiled. Interesting, I said, because I run Central Division. And I don't remember authorizing any arrest tonight. Both men froze. Their confidence cracked instantly. And then I noticed someone else, standing in the shadows near the gate, arms crossed, watching. It was Mark, the HOA president. He was smirking like he had just pulled off the perfect plan, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. The 2 fake officers stood frozen on my porch, exchanging nervous glances. Their plan had already started to crumble, but they still tried to push through. One of them straightened his shoulders and barked, "Sir, step outside now, or we'll be forced to detain you." I tilted my head, studying them like suspects in an interrogation room. My voice stayed calm, steady. "If you're going to detain me, at least tell me which judge signed that warrant you're holding." The man looked down at the paper, then quickly folded it back. He didn't have an answer. That was the moment I knew. They weren't just sloppy. They weren't even cops. Behind them, Mark stepped forward from the shadows, his arms still crossed. His smirk hadn't faded. "Just cooperate," he called out. "You've broken enough rules in this neighborhood. It's time someone finally held you accountable." I almost laughed. "Accountable?" I asked. "For what? Questioning where the HOA funds are disappearing? Or for refusing to bow down to you?" Mark's smirk widened. "You talk too much, and tonight you're done talking." The officers moved closer. I could feel the tension in the air tightening, like a coiled spring about to snap. But what Mark didn't know was that I had anticipated something like this. Earlier that week, after the anonymous threats in the unregistered SUV, I'd placed a silent alert with my department. If anything unusual happened at my address, backup would arrive quietly, without sirens, without lights. So while Mark thought he was cornering me, I was really buying time. I stepped back just slightly, keeping my voice steady. "Gentlemen, if you really want to arrest me, then go ahead, put the cuffs on." The taller one pulled out a pair of cheap handcuffs. Wrong brand, wrong build, not police issue. He reached for my wrist, but before he could touch me, headlights appeared at the far end of the street. Not one car, three, unmarked police vehicles rolling in silently. Mark's smirk finally cracked. The two fake officers froze again, this time in pure panic. I leaned in just enough for them to hear me whisper, "Game over." Within seconds, the real officers surrounded the porch. Guns drawn, commands shouted. "Hands up! Drop the cuffs! Step back now!" The imposters stumbled, dropping their fake badges. They were on the ground in moments, cuffed with real steel this time. Mark, however, didn't move. He stood stiff, his face pale, but his pride wouldn't let him run. I stepped off the porch, walked right up to him, and said quietly, "You really thought you could fool me with fake cops? You didn't even bother to check who I was." For the first time, Mark's eyes showed fear. But I knew this was just the beginning. Because if the HOA president was desperate enough to send fake police to my door, then there were bigger secrets hiding behind those neatly painted house. And I was going to uncover every last one. The imposters were dragged into squad cars, their fake uniforms crumpled, their false badges scattered like broken props on the porch. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering, afraid to step outside. And Mark? He still hadn't moved. He looked stunned, frozen in place. For a man who thrived on control, he suddenly had none. I turned to the lead officer. "Take him too. We'll sort it out downtown." For the first time, Mark's smirk vanished completely. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president," he protested, his voice shaky. I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "You're not above the law, and tonight you're going to learn that the hard way." At the station, the two imposters were separated into different rooms for questioning. I wanted to see which one would crack first. In interrogation room A, the taller man sat stiffly, sweat dripping down his temple. I laid his fake badge on the table and tapped it. "Where'd you get this?" No answer. I leaned in. Badges like these don't just appear out of nowhere. Someone paid for them. Someone gave you instructions. And unless you start talking, you'll be looking at felony impersonation charges and more. His hands trembled. He looked away, lips pressed tight. So I left him there. Silence is sometimes louder than any words. In room B, the shorter man was already unraveling. His foot tapped nervously against the floor. He jumped when I entered. I didn't sit down. I just stared at him until the silence became unbearable. Finally, he broke. "We didn't want to do it," he blurted. "He made us. Said it was just intimidation, nothing serious." "Who made you?" I asked. He hesitated, then whispered, "The HOA president." Mark Warren pressed further. "And how long have you been working with him?" The man swallowed hard. "Not just him. There are others, some of the board members. They They're not what they seem. I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean? His voice dropped. It's not about lawn rules or dues. It's about money, big money. They're laundering it through HOA funds, fake maintenance projects, inflated invoices. Mark runs it, but he's not the only one benefiting. That was it, the thread I needed to pull. Meanwhile, Mark sat in holding, trying to call every lawyer in his contact list. But what he didn't know was that his so-called lawyers were already under investigation. I had been working quietly with federal partners on suspicious financial activity in several HOAs across the city. Mark's neighborhood was already on the radar. And now, thanks to his arrogance, he had handed me the missing piece. The next day, I returned to the neighborhood. People watched as police combed through HOA offices, seizing files, hard drives, and financial records. The pristine illusion of control was shattering before their eyes. An elderly woman from down the street approached me, her voice trembling. I wanted to speak up for years, but anyone who complained was fined, harassed, even forced to sell their homes. We thought no one could stop them. Her words confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, fear, control, and now the fear was breaking. That night, I sat in my living room, reviewing the seized documents. Page after page of falsified contracts, shell companies, and money transfers. But what caught my attention most was a folder marked Security. Inside were photographs, not just of me, but of nearly every resident in the neighborhood. Kids walking home from school, families at backyard barbecues, people inside their own homes, unaware they were being watched. It wasn't just surveillance, it was intimidation, control by fear. And buried at the bottom of the folder was a single photograph that made my blood run cold. It was me, sitting at my desk in the police department, a picture that could only have been taken inside the building. That meant Mark had someone on the inside, someone feeding him information. The HOA wasn't just corrupt, it was connected. I knew then this was bigger than one neighborhood, bigger than one corrupt president. This was an entire network hidden behind the facade of neatly cut lawns and freshly painted fences. And if I wanted to take it down, I'd have to go deeper, much deeper. The photograph of me inside the police department haunted me. It wasn't just surveillance anymore. It was infiltration. Someone within my own ranks, someone I trusted, was feeding information to the HOA. I tightened my grip on the photo, my own station, my own office, compromised. If they had someone on the inside, this was no longer just corruption. This was organized crime. The following days were tense. Every officer's face looked different to me now. I studied their movements, their tone of voice, even the way they held their pens. Which one of them was the mole? We kept Mark in custody, but he wasn't talking. The two imposters we had arrested gave conflicting statements. One swore they were paid by a board member. The other claimed they just followed orders. Meanwhile, the HOA board pretended they knew nothing. Their lawyers spoke louder than they did, each one dismissing our evidence as fabrications. But the documents didn't lie. Millions of dollars moved through shell companies, bogus maintenance contracts, fake landscaping projects, a vast web of transactions, all designed to funnel money through a laundering network hidden in plain sight. And the worst part, it wasn't just our neighborhood. The files listed other HOAs across the city. Same pattern, same silence from residents too scared to question where their money was going. Each HOA was another piece of the puzzle. Each neighborhood, another cell in a growing empire. This was bigger than I had imagined. Then came the betrayal. One evening, as I reviewed the files in my office, an officer from my department entered. He moved slowly, too slowly, carrying a sealed envelope in his hand. "This just came in for you, Chief," he said. His face was blank, too blank. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single note, typed in the same block letters as before. "You can't stop us. We're inside your house, too." I looked up at the officer. His jaw was tight. His hand trembled slightly. And then it clicked. He was the mole. I stood slowly, careful not to reach for my weapon too soon. "Funny," I said, keeping my tone even. You've been with the department for, what, 5 years? And yet I can't find a single record of your academy training." His eyes widened. His cover was slipping. He reached for his sidearm, but he never got the chance. My command staff stormed the office, weapons raised. The mole was disarmed and dragged out, cursing, screaming about how I'd never take down the network. And in that moment, I finally had proof. The HOA wasn't acting alone. They were plugged into something much larger. That night, everything changed. We launched coordinated raids, federal agents, local police, financial crime units. Multiple HOA offices across the city were hit simultaneously. What we uncovered was staggering. Hidden accounts tied to offshore banks, fake contractors who didn't exist, connections to known criminal organizations. Mark had thought he was untouchable, but his empire was crumbling. Still, the man refused to break. In the interrogation room, I faced him one last time. He leaned back in his chair, hands cuffed, eyes cold and defiant. The room was silent, but not empty. Silence in an interrogation chamber was never pure. There was always a low hum from the fluorescent lights overhead, the faint crackle of the recording equipment in the corner, and the steady drip of tension that filled every inch of space. Mark sat across the steel table, his wrists cuffed, chains rattling with the smallest movement. He leaned back in his chair like a man who owned the place, his expression carved with arrogance. His lips curved into that same smirk he had worn since the night of his arrest. I stood by the door for a moment, watching him. He wanted me to walk in hurried, unsettled. He wanted me to show frustration. Instead, I let the silence breathe, stretching it, making him feel the weight of time pressing down. Finally, I stepped forward and pulled out the chair opposite him. "Mark," I said evenly, my voice carrying none of the anger I felt boiling beneath the surface. "You've been quiet so far. I'm giving you a chance. Talk." He tilted his head, eyes glinting under the harsh white lights. "Talk? About what? About a neighborhood dispute? About some misplaced funds?" He chuckled. "Chief, you're chasing shadows. This is all beneath you." I didn't flinch. Instead, I slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, contracts, wire transfers, evidence of shell companies with his signature. His smirk faltered for the briefest second, but he recovered quickly, pressing his lips together in defiance. "You think paperwork scares me?" he sneered. "You've only scratched the surface." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table, lowering my voice to a razor-sharp whisper. "Then tell me what I'm missing." He stared at me, and for a moment, I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. Finally, he leaned back, chains clinking against the chair. "You think you've won," he said slowly, each word deliberate, venomous. "But you have no idea how deep this goes. HOAS are just the surface. We control entire neighborhoods, entire districts. We own politicians, judges, even some of your officers. You can't stop what's already in motion." His words hung in the air like smoke, a thick, suffocating. I studied him in silence, letting the confession echo in my mind. He wasn't bluffing. His eyes didn't shift. His tone carried too much conviction. I thought of the photograph left on my desk, the one proving someone inside my department had betrayed me. His words were the missing piece. I finally leaned closer, locking my eyes with his. My voice was calm but edged with steel. "You made one mistake, Mark. You came after me in my own home. You thought I was just another resident, someone you could intimidate with fake police and black SUVs. But I'm the chief of police. And now—" I let the silence stretch. "I know exactly where to aim." For the first time, his confidence cracked. His smirk faltered. He shifted in his chair, trying to regain control, but the sweat gathering along his temple betrayed him. "Do you really think cutting off one head will kill the body?" he snapped, his voice sharper now, defensive. "You've started something you can't finish. You've declared war on a system that was here long before you and will be here long after you're gone." I didn't blink. I let him see the resolve in my eyes. "Then I'll keep cutting until there's nothing left to grow back." The recorder in the corner captured everything: his arrogance, his confession, his threats. And in that moment, I realized Mark wasn't scared of prison. He wasn't scared of me. He was scared of exposure. The network thrived in shadows behind closed HOA meetings and silent bank transfers. Dragging them into the light was the only weapon I had. For the next hour, I pressed him. Names, dates, accounts. He danced around my questions, twisting every answer into riddles. He spoke of partners in high places, of contracts no court would dare touch. He laughed at subpoenas, at the thought of trials. But every now and then, in the flicker of his eye or the twitch of his jaw, he revealed more than he intended. A name muttered, a location hinted at. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to form. When I finally stood, pushing the chair back with a screech, he looked up at me with something new in his eyes. Not fear, not guilt, but recognition. He realized I wasn't going to stop, and for the first time his smirk was gone. That night, as I left the station, the weight of his words clung to me. Entire districts, politicians, officers. This wasn't corruption, it was an infection. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The battle had only just begun.